Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori Amin, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. Today we have an author interview with the writing duo behind May McGoldrick. The author duo writes historical romance. In this episode, we chat what it's like to write with a partner, through rural historical research while writing historical romance, and of course, around the book recommendations. Now let's get to the show. Hi, Jim and Niku, also known as May McGoldrick. So welcome to the What to Read Next podcast.
So good to be here. Thanks for having us.
Really, it's a pleasure.
Thank you for being in the show. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Again, I'm Niku McGoldrick. Writing is my second career, or maybe third career. I'm not sure, but I was an engineer before turning to be a writer, and English actually is my second language. So I write in growing up speaking some other language, and I learned 4 years ago, I learned to speak this language, and that's what I write in now.
I love it. What's your first language?
So I was born in Iran and came here when I was 17, over 40 years ago. And even at school, when I was a young child, French was my second language. Actually, English is my third language. Been speaking it so many years that I think I've forgotten all the other languages I knew.
And I can barely get through English, so.
Yeah, English is my second language too, so I understand. I go back and forth, but right now I read mainly in English and I write mainly in English, and it takes me a while to get back into my first language. So I understand.
I so get that. Yeah.
Well, I was a college professor, and my PhD was in 16th century British literature. And one of the poets I wrote about was William Dunbar, a Scot, and so that was kind of always an interest for me. But
and I can see both in your writing. I can see your influence of the history within the writing, which is kind of like neat to know. Now I'm curious to hear what is true, what is fiction. What was inspired by real life events, and which ones are not.
We'll keep you guessing. No, we do have some answers for you, but yeah, we have really fun with it. We are in many ways when it comes to our fiction, we are more focused on history and relationship and romance in that order. So I think any of our books that readers read, they're gonna find it very rich in history, in actual history.
Yeah, I noticed that. That was something I'm not familiar with, that time period of history. So it was neat to just discover this whole period of different activism and different rebellion and the English and the Scottish. And so it was pretty neat to read it.
We're so glad you enjoyed it. And another thing about us is we tend to be more Dickensian in the style that we research history. We are more into finding periods and events that the regular people, average people, dealt with. So you see that too in our work. So.
Yeah. So what inspired you to become a writer?
I'm going to go first, and then I'll let Jim go second. I always want to be a writer. That was my dream, and we were both. I was serious reader growing up, but then, as I mentioned before, when you come to a new country as an immigrant, and there are many challenges ahead of you, and so I pursued, for financial reasons, I pursued a technical degree. I became an engineer because that's how I could pay my bills and basically survive. So the dream of writing, but I continued to read. And that was my, true passion, someday becoming a writer. So when the right time came, then I'll let Jim go next.
Yeah. It was, I think when I graduated from, I also always sort of was a writer or wanted to be one. And when I graduated from college, my goal was to write a best-selling novel like Fitzgerald by the time I was 25. That didn't happen, but it did eventually happen. So, anyway, it was really what inspired me was the ability to work with Niku, but we can tell you about that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to hear, since you're duo of writers, how do you divide up the work when you write the story?
We both are quite involved with it every day. In some ways, the way we work is when every writing room for any TV show or any movie is done, we discuss the stories every day, day after day, morning and afternoon. We have this little session. Once a book we've decided on that's a novel we're going to write, every morning we get together and we say, okay, I'm going to write this chapter, Jim's going to write that chapter. And then in the afternoon, we swap our work. I read Jim's work and Jim reads my work. And I delete Jim's work, but he doesn't know it. No, just kidding.
Man, I was wondering what happened.
Of course, afternoons are for disagreements because it happens that I write a scene. Sometimes the little details is what gets you. Like in the morning, we are writing 2 consecutive scenes, and in my scene, the weather is gorgeous and sunny, and in Jim's scene, there's a big storm going on. And supposedly these 2 chapters are only 5 minutes apart, so of course doesn't work, but we forgot to discuss the weather, among other things, that morning.
So there's really not much division of labor. It's more it's a lot of revision, and we do it until we're both happy, or until Niku's happy.
It's not any faster to write with 2 people, but we definitely enjoy it. And to kind of reduce the arguments, and we go for a lot of walks. Our dog is the best fit dog in the neighborhood because he goes for miles of walks.
That's awesome.
So that's pretty much. And again, it's been an evolving process. There are some books that we just felt, or there are some sections of the novel that we find out that one of us has to take a lead, and we just do as we have to. And after 25 years of working together, we pretty much know that my strength is when it comes to characters. Jim's strength has to do with action and research, and we take charge. I will not challenge Jim on some of the things. He will not challenge me on other things, and so we have fun with it. We do.
That's great to hear. I love it. I'm always curious to hear how, 2 authors can come together and write a story and make it seamless. Like, it doesn't feel like there's 2 different voices. It just feels like it's one cohesive voice.
Well, that was interesting because when we had written about 8 books before, Heinemann Publishers asked us to do a nonfiction, sort of a how-to book about collaborative fiction writing. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we contacted about 30 teams of writers who were working as partners. Some of them were sisters, sister and brother, friends, and there were a lot of different processes for writing together. But
some of those people never talk to each other again after their first attempt.
Yeah, because it's. But the bottom line was that we didn't even realize how we were writing together or why it was successful until we talked to all these other writers.
And we found out that we complement each other the way we are. I mean, I'm more of a screenplay writer. Jim is a poet. and our styles complement each other. And neither of us have great egos. We understand that the book we write is a product
of both of us.
And that's the key. And that's a hard lesson that a lot of every single pair that we spoke to talked about. To collaborate, you have to recognize that you are a team. And it was fun.
So we never get attached to unrevised work. That's kind of the key.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just, there's a lot of revision, there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of collaboration that happens.
Exactly.
Yeah. So do you follow an outline, or do you see where the story leads you?
For suspense, when we write suspense, we follow more of an outline. When we write historical, if I could get Jim to read my mind, we wouldn't have to do an outline. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's like, maybe it's the engineering in me, but I have like all these file cabinets in my head, and I don't forget things. But of course, he can't read my mind, so we have to write an outline. But it's fun. I mean,
and it's really more about plans than it is really outlines, because everything is changeable.
Yeah, and the outline, as Jim said, we have a skeleton that we start with, and we decide, this is the setting, the character, so forth. But then always 25% through the book, things change. Then 50% into the book, things change. And so it's constantly changing, but at least it's structured there that both of us are speaking the same language as we go through.
Yeah. How do you organize yourself as a writer? How do you tackle your ideas, inspirations, and characters?
It's organizing ourselves is actually very interesting, because I am in some ways a workaholic. I mean, and maybe it goes back to my engineering days, that being very structured to at my desk at certain hour, work so many hours, so forth. Jim, and when he comes to even organizing my thoughts, I have to pace. I have to walk. I'm constantly wearing a path in the rug. But Jim has his own style. I mean, I work in the morning. Jim will be happy to work at night. I pace. Jim sits.
But in terms of how we organize ourselves, it's really about we have a notebook for every single novel that we've written, and in that novel, it's like the Bible. It has the characters. It has as we talk out the plot, it has scene by scene by scene by scene, and the research. A lot of the research goes in there as well. But what we also use, we have spreadsheets on the computer. That's the Niku's engineering. The spreadsheets are for the characters, so in that spreadsheets we'll have descriptions of the characters. We'll have kind of the language that they use, their mannerisms, their attitudes, etc. And
then we have like Pinterest. A lot of our research. We catalog everything on Pinterest, and whenever a book gets released, we release all that information. So if our readers want to find something more about an event, so forth, they go there. But for every book we've written, there is and again, we call it our story Bible. We have that, and it's quite. And since we write in series, a lot of times, we start a family, we start a project, then we end up writing 10 books about this family. We go to the second generation. So we've done that 3 times, so far in our historicals, and it's wonderful that 10 years could go by and we could still go back and pull up something, the story Bible of the first book, and say, this is what happened. These were the dates. And keep those characters consistent. But, as we're writing the book also, especially as we get toward the end, we use a board with Post-it notes to keep for our scene planning.
and that helps us keep the storylines straight and clear. So we might have, one color of Post-its for the series plot, another one for the adventure plot for that novel, another one for the historical plot or the romance plot. So we use that, especially as we get toward the end, and want to make sure we don't let any threads slip out of our fingers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine, especially when you're working with series where you're working with, multiple books, you want to keep them straight. You want to keep the storyline going. So, yeah, I love that you're using Pinterest.
But one thing, that Pinterest is has been a huge help for us in terms of pinning images and articles and maps, and we've got. They're really a treasure trove.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love Pinterest. I love discovering different things. I love discovering when authors actually have Pinterest boards, because it gives you another sense of the book. It just gives you a different reading experience where you're just realizing different places or different inspirations.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So do you share your work along the way to others, or do you wait till it's completed for others to read?
So anytime we come up with a new project, we, for the first couple of months, we work closely with our agent. We have the two of us, so we pass the idea by her, and then she comes back, makes some suggestions, then we develop a synopsis for it, then she comes back with some suggestions, then we send her first so many pages. So our agent really is the one that, and that's on new projects, not on every book, but when we are out for contract. And outside of that, we pretty much then, and of course, when a publisher is ready to acquire the book, they see it at that stage as well. But then beyond that, we just go and finish the book. And then pretty much we have, two lines of editors. We have the editor at the publishing house, and we have a amazing editor that she independently sometimes works on our projects and gives us feedback, which is, over the years, we've been fortunate enough to be nominated for some awards. And I think because a lot of eyes see the work, and we try to catch if there are any errors, if there are any shortcomings, it gets identified before.
Yeah, I think an editor is key to make the work better, to just kind of take it from, great work to an even better work. An editor can be a great partner into the writing process.
I agree. Totally agree.
So talk to us about the Royal and Highlander books. What was the source of inspiration for this series?
So about this series, the Royal Hand, and you read both of them. You read the first two. We're very excited. Yeah. So very interesting about the idea for this series has been in our head for quite a while, and we were thinking about it. And number of it, one thing specifically that drove it for us was that a lot of things, there's a period of history, 1820, England, Scotland, that is a forgotten period. A lot happened during that time, but British government decided to hush it.
And the interesting thing is that the Regency period there are more novels published in this Regency period, and yet the real history of it often goes untold. So what we did was, part of what inspired us was the Prince Regent himself, who was, I think, really a jerk, but also the lingering influence of Bonnie Prince Charlie and in England and Scotland. And
another person that was really key to us to push us to write this story was Caroline. Caroline, the wife of the wife of Prince Regent. She was Princess Diana of her time. People adored her. People loved her. She was the queen of the people. But the Prince Regent hated her and ran a smear campaign against her the entire time, from the moment he married her for her money to the moment that she died. And this was so unfair. It was so, even to this day, if you read the people's view of that time, there are information that are getting revealed now, and you see how much she was loved, and then versus what the government's position was. And we were always looking for a chance to show a side of Caroline that a lot of history books written by the scholars at that time, was not portrayed. And I think another thing that is important, we got to remember and believe in that who wrote the history, and how did they shape it, to control what information was revealed.
One of the things that when I was doing my doctoral work, you learn a lot about the history, but what you have to go further with in researching is how people lived and how people dealt with the currents of change that go through every time period. But one of the things that we found also, and it kind of inspired us, because this time period was so similar to the one we're in right now. There was it was a time that where the government of the crown was taking more and more power away, and the civil rights liberties away from common people who really just wanted a fair treatment and a voice in government. But the crown was brutal in the way they suppressed any opposition to the power, and then they used the newspapers to sell it as if they were protecting the safety of the people. Kind of similar.
And they pulled a lot of fear techniques, so forth, and entrapment. And then Peterloo happened. And Peter,
you know what that is?
Yeah, you should explain what Peterloo was.
Well, Peterloo was as people were beginning to protest.
And this was right after the Napoleonic War, and soldiers came back, and the country was hungry.
And so Parliament was passing laws to protect the moneyed classes, because that's who was in Parliament. So the common people really wanted to have a voice in that, and they wanted reform of Parliament. They wanted so anyway, they began to protest, and they would assemble. And what happened was that the government passed a series of laws that actually took away their right to assemble. And so there were more than 12 or 13 people that assembled, and that was considered sedition or treason. And but people continued to assemble and protest for their own rights. And there was in Manchester in England, there was one afternoon there was approximately 60,000 people that gathered peaceably, men, women, children, and they had speakers, and they wanted to kind of send the message that there needed to be reform. And the government, the crown, sent in armed militia with drawn sabers, and they rode down these people who were just out for a Sunday outing, and they with their sabers drawn and ran people through, and people were killed and hundreds were injured. And it was they called that Peterloo.
They call it Peterloo Massacre, which is an actual event. There was a movie just this year came out portraying that, and this was another piece of history that for many years it was just not taught, suppressed because they didn't want people known. So the 1820 Radical War is a big part of history, British history, that again was never written about. And so the way we are, we had to set our story there. We had to deal with that.
We put our characters right in the middle of all that conflict.
Because our goal was that the readers will read our work and they want to learn a little bit more about it. And so anyway, that's where we are.
Yeah, so when I read it, it's my first foray within historical fiction. So it's one of those things where I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about it. And then I realized I was like, there's so much I wanted to know. Was it real? Was it not real? And I Google or Wikipedia some of the stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's so relatable to what's happening in the modern time. At the same time, to see history repeats itself. I found it so fascinating.
I'm so glad you did that, because that's the way our historicals are. We do pick pieces of history that are not well known, and
we try to bring them to life, and well.
And a lot of our readers over the years have told us that they relearn history through our books. So it's fun. We enjoy it. We enjoy it.
Yeah, history is far more than just the dates and the battles.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you portray in Highland Crown. You had your main character is a physician. She's a female physician, and so I'm curious to hear what inspired you to create a character like Isabella, who is she was part of the rebels, but she was not part of it. She was just like so focused on her work and focused on her sisters, and then just things.
Yeah. So. One of the things, and another thing that we like to bring in is, again, going back to the fact that history was written by men. There were many distinguished women in history. We portrayed Isabella, or we had modeled her after an actual historical figure, Dorothea Exelben. That was a real woman who lived 70 years before our Isabella. She studied and got her medical degree in Germany and practiced medicine there. And our feeling was that we are certain, and again, as more research you do, on our webpage, we have a blog entry about 5 kick-ass women of the history. That's just a bit into that how many women are in history that, again, they never really wrote about them, but they were there and they distinguished themselves.
Making a difference.
Right. And so Isabella is a reluctant hero. I mean, our feeling was Isabella is one that she feels very accomplished because she got a medical degree, and she'd be just perfectly happy to just live her life and allow to practice medicine. And she just wants to heal. She doesn't want to be part of the fighting. But then, of course, that's not what is in store for her. She gets dragged into this life that she has to lead. But it was really fun. It was really fun to make Isabella a very strong woman, accomplished woman, and have her get on this road of adventure. And again, she shows up in the second book. She has a much bigger part even in the third book, Highland Swords, and it's we had really fun with it.
I love it. And then we have the Son of Scotland. So I'm curious to hear, was there such leader within that time period who, ignited change for Scotland, or was it something fiction?
Well, with us, what we did was we had, there were a lot of people that basically they delivered arms to them, because even though after Culloden that battle was over, but they were
where Bonnie Prince Charles was beaten.
Yeah, but there were a lot of rebellion in the Highlands still. There were a lot of it, and there were armed dealers that were coming from Canada, from United States at that time, and bringing arms into the Highlands, so forth. So we had this idea of him that he's a ship's captain, that he's a rebel. And also there were a lot of land clearances. So they were, people that had to be taken back, to Canada, to, they were pushed out of their land, But the actual relation to Bonnie Prince Charlie, that was very interesting.
Yeah, one of the, well, if you've read the first book, then or if your listeners have read the first book, then they know that Kenny is the grandson of Bonnie Prince Charlie, and so part of the research was we realized that this was actually a possibility. I mean, we could create this fictional character because Kenny's grandmother was a woman, a Polish aristocrat named Katarzyna Jablonowski, and she was the daughter of a general in the Polish army, and she was also the niece of a woman who was Princess Talmond, who was at one time the mistress of Bonnie Prince Charlie. Well,
so a lot of these are actual, real historical figures.
Yes.
But then we insert our fiction into it because our feeling was you put the right people, the right historical people in the right places at the right time. Now, who says McGoldricks can come up with the sun being born there? So that's what we did. But there was so we thought, okay, he's not only an arm dealer, but also he has around as reluctant heroes. Our goal for Highland Crown was to bring in two reluctant characters together, and they have to fight a war that they feel like is not theirs, but it becomes theirs. So.
Yeah, and then in Highland Jewel, you have a reluctant warrior who doesn't want to be back in war.
Yes. This was a very interesting thing about, again, an actual research that showed that to us about Niall.
In Highland Jewel, the second book in the series, there were, people who wanted change were often depicted as violent rebels by the government. They were sort of their resistance to the injustices of the crown kind of forced them into this outlaw role. But Nico and I tend to think of these people more as heroes, especially in our stories. Maisie fits into that mold for sure. She's the heroine of Highland Jewel. She wanted women to have a voice in government. And that made her an enemy.
Female Reform Society, that was a real thing. That was a real society. And Mary Fieldus, she was a woman that in some ways she's the mother of the movement for the right to vote, for the suffrage movement. And so a lot of these was based on real events. After Peterloo Massacre that we talked about, Female Reform Society sprang out all over United Kingdom. They were in Scotland, they were in England, they were all over the place. And these were a group of women that got together and they fought for they went on the street, they carried banners, they wore their white dresses, and just like, again, Mary Fieldus, she was cut down. She survived it, but she was cut down at Peterloo. So these were radicals, but we have the rights we have today because of those women, because of what they did. In terms of Niall, that was an interesting thing of what British government did to the Highlanders. They wanted the Highlanders, they wanted the Highland regiments to fight against Napoleon. But what happened once the war was over, they didn't want those Highlanders to return to their land. They didn't want them to return to their people. This is actual history.
Yeah. Parliament was really afraid of the unrest and the growing unrest that was happening in England and in Scotland, and particularly in the Highlands. There was, they were afraid that what happened in France with their revolution could happen in England, and it would topple the monarchy. People were that angry. I mean, historically, and But so rather than allow these Highland regiments to return to Scotland, where they could actually fight against the English if a war broke out between them, they shipped these regiments off, to different places, to Ireland to crush the rebels that were unhappy there, to the Caribbean to protect the Sugar Islands, and to India and Africa to help spread the colonial power of the British.
So Niall recognizes this and wants no part in it. And so he's tired of fighting wars because he knows what the plans are. He sees that in action. So again, much of Niall's motivation is absolutely based on truth, based on the way these regiments were treated. So in reading Highland Jewel, you find out that there's much of real history and real feelings of the time period is in there. That's what we tried to capture.
It was really good. So what can we expect for book 3, Highland Sword?
The Highland Sword is the most, we have the most probably firecracker heroine we ever had in Morrigan. She's a warrior. She would be in the front line and fight if they let her. And she's faced with this guy, Aidan Grant, that he's a politician. He believes in that, the only way to succeed is to do it in terms of peacefully, in terms of getting the rights and so forth.
Political and working in the courts.
Yeah, she's ready to go war, and he wants peace. She wants revenge. He's after justice. She's ready to spill blood. He believes that too much been spilled already. So it's a very interesting chemistry between them. And then meanwhile, in the middle of the entire story, we have Kenny and Isabella and Maisie and Niall. They all are there. So this really the story of 6 of them in this setting. And it's fun. We finished writing it, so we are just in the revision stages now with our editors. So we are very excited about it.
It's a very exciting conclusion to really all of their stories.
Right, and it's right now scheduled for March 30th of 2020 release. So
I love it. I pre-ordered. So I put in my Goodreads. I was like, to be read, because I finished reading back to back, and I was like, I want to know next. And I know Morgan was such an interesting character. Like, she was like all about learning how to shoot and how to use knives. And I was like, she will be an interesting heroine.
Yeah, yeah. And we got some surprises for you.
Yeah, we do. She is a riot. We are really happy with her. Yep.
That's awesome. Now let's go to a round of book recommendations. This is an opportunity for you to share with our audience what did you read next. So what is your favorite genre?
Okay, so we each have and that changes, but right now really is...
I think I like historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm more into psychological thrillers, and I think even though that sometimes we write historical, sometimes we write contemporary thrillers, I think we both like to read across genres because we read all the time, and we just bring a little bit of everything into the story. So
I love it. Who is your favorite author?
My favorite author is Charles Dickens.
With me, it's very hard to pick one, but I again grew up in a different language, different culture, and I read Victor Hugo, I read Tolstoy, but right now I really love to read first-time authors. My feeling is, although I do read everything that Gillian Flynn writes, but at the same time, there's something very fresh about first-time authors that I love because I think it's like they're groundbreaking. They are doing something different. So I constantly search actually for first-time authors and I read them. And if I like them, I recommend them and help them to make their career. So
I love it. What are your top 3 favorite books of all time?
Mine would be Bleak House by Charles Dickens, Pride and Prejudice, and a book called The Quincunx by Charles Palliser.
Mine is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I am just a revolutionary in heart, and I just love that book. And Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I've read that book in 3 different languages, and I've seen the play in every form that has been released, and I sob every time. And of course, I love Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte.
What has been a book that you read this year that you loved?
Well, we share books when we read.
When we love something, we both have to read them. Yeah.
So one that we both read, 2 books that we both read and both loved was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owen.
And The Silent Patient by Alex
Michaelides.
It's just amazing. Both of them amazing books.
Yeah, I loved Where the Crawdads Sing. I do own The Silent Patient, and it's hyped up. So you mentioned it that you loved it, so I'm definitely going to be adding it to my TBR.
Yeah. And he's a first-time author, and I think I've given, and both of them, Where the Crawdads Sing too. I think Jim and I have gifted those 2 books probably to 10 people by now. It's just everybody will have to get gifted. Those books get gifted, so it's wonderful.
I love it. So tell us where we can find you online.
So you can find us on our website, maymcgoldrick.com, and we are also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all under the same, Pinterest, all under May McGoldrick tag, and we are we love to hear from our readers. We answer every single email, even if you loved our work or you hated our work or you just want to say hi. We love to write back to you. So
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Jim and Niku, for a great interview. For show notes and a list of books mentioned in this podcast, please visit whattoreadnextblog.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back this Thursday with another author interview. Have a great day.